My sister banned me from her wedding. Because I'm just a cleaner. Before we begin the story, take a moment to support us by liking, sharing, and subscribing. Your support means the world to our channel and helps us spread more shocking true stories to light. Now, let's get started. Please, don't come to my wedding. Vanessa's voice was quiet, hesitant, almost ashamed. I frowned. Why? She let out a heavy sigh, as if carrying the weight of the world. I don't want people to know you're a cleaner. Her words hit me like a slap. But before I could respond, my mother's cold voice cut through the silence. We tell people you're dead. Never contact us again. Dead. That was what I was to them. A lump formed in my throat. But I refused to let them see me cry. Instead, I turned and walked away, my vision blurred by unshed tears. That night, I tried to push the pain aside. I buried myself in work, scrubbing, dusting, making spaces sparkle, just like I had for years. But no amount of cleaning could wash away the stain of rejection. Then, on the day of the wedding, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. Call after call. My sister, my mother, my relatives. What was happening? A morning like any other, or so it seemed. The staff room was bathed in soft morning sunlight as Eleanor Foster adjusted the collar of her uniform. The golden pin on her chest gleamed, head of cleaning, a title she had earned through years of dedication. She had been working in this towering San Francisco high-rise for over a decade, leading the cleaning staff with quiet pride. Miss Eleanor, you're early again, a familiar voice called out. Eleanor turned to see Maria, one of her colleagues, smiling as she entered the room. She smiled back. We've got a special cleaning job today, 26th floor. The Hartwell Corporation's executive boardroom. She moved with practiced efficiency, double-checking her cleaning cart while handing out assignments to her team. Everyone, thank you for your hard work today, she said warmly as her team dispersed. The respect she commanded wasn't forced, it was earned. Over the years, she had proven herself with her meticulous work and her care for both the job and her team. 3 times in the last 5 years, she had been recognized as an exemplary staff member. Even the high-profile tenants of the building trusted her. Yet, as she rode the elevator to the 26th floor, a different kind of recognition nagged at her thoughts. She checked her phone. No messages. Not from Vanessa. Not since their mother had called last week to announce Vanessa's engagement. Her younger sister, the rising star of a prestigious advertising agency, had secured a dazzling future, a fiancé from an elite family. Richard Hartwell, a name Eleanor had only known from news articles and corporate memos. A name that now tied her to a family that didn't even know she existed. Or rather, to a family that had been told she was dead. Eleanor sighed, pushing the thoughts aside. This was just another workday. At least, that's what she told herself. A home that no longer felt like home. That evening, Eleanor stood outside a familiar house in a quiet suburban neighborhood. The home she had grown up in. The place that once held warmth, laughter, and the scent of her mother's home-cooked meals. But now, as she reached for the door handle, she felt none of that. She stepped inside. From the living room, voices floated toward her. The wedding planner will present 3 seating arrangements. Her mother's voice rang out, businesslike and precise. Since the Hartwell guest list is extensive, we need to maintain a proper balance. We have to invite everyone, Richard's father suggested. Vanessa added, her voice light but laced with tension. There are so many corporate ties to consider. Eleanor exhaled softly before stepping into the room. Hello. The chatter stopped. Vanessa and their mother turned in unison, their surprised expressions freezing as if she had stepped into a place where she no longer belonged. Papers, charts, and expensive-looking invitations lay scattered on the coffee table, a world meticulously planned. One she was never meant to be part of. Their mother's lips pressed into a thin line. Eleanor, you should have called ahead. Vanessa stood up quickly, smoothing down her designer blouse. She offered a half-smile. A polite hug. Nothing more. It's been a while, Eleanor said, swallowing the unease rising in her chest. Congratulations on your engagement, Mom told me. Vanessa's face brightened slightly. Thanks. Yes, Richard is amazing. You might know his father, Jonathan Hartwell. Eleanor's breath hitched. Jonathan Hartwell. She knew the name well. The man practically owned the building she had worked in for years. She had never met him personally, but his name carried weight, influence, power. So, when's the wedding? Eleanor asked, shaking off the thought. The 15th of next month. Their mother answered briskly. We're incredibly busy with the preparations. Eleanor hesitated before asking the next question. I haven't received an invitation yet. When should I expect it? Silence. Vanessa and their mother exchanged a glance. A hesitation. A secret hanging in the air. Vanessa opened her mouth to speak. But their mother cut in. About the invitations, we're still considering. Eleanor frowned. Considering? Her mother exhaled as if exhausted by the conversation already. The Hartwell family is highly respected. In their social circles, certain expectations exist. Mom, what are you trying to say? This time, it was Vanessa who looked away, unable to meet Eleanor's gaze. Margaret's next words were calm, detached, like a final decision had already been made. To be honest, Eleanor, your occupation is an issue. The words hit Eleanor like a punch to the gut. My occupation? Her voice rose slightly. I take pride in my work. We know, Vanessa said quickly, as if trying to smooth things over. But their mother wasn't done. We told them you're the head of the Corporate Facilities Management Division. She said smoothly. Eleanor froze. You lied? It's not a lie, their mother said, the same way someone might excuse a small, harmless fib. It's just a different way of saying things. A lump formed in Eleanor's throat. She turned to Vanessa, hoping, praying, that her sister would deny it. But Vanessa wouldn't meet her eyes. The Hartwells, they think my only sister is, she faltered. Her mother finished for her. We told them you died. Eleanor's heart stopped. Died. We don't want the Hartwell family to know that we have a daughter who is just a cleaner. Her mother added, her voice cold, unapologetic. Eleanor's fingers trembled at her sides. So, I'm nothing to you? You'd rather pretend I never existed than tell the truth? Her mother sighed, exasperated. This is Vanessa's chance at a better life. Please understand. Understand? Understand that her own mother and sister were so ashamed of her that they had erased her existence? Eleanor slowly stood, her throat tight with unshed tears. She swallowed hard. No, she would not cry, not in front of them. She took a deep breath and said the only thing left to say. I understand. Then, before she walked out the door, she turned back. Her voice was steady, unshaken. I am not ashamed of my job. But a mother who denies her own daughter? That is truly shameful. She didn't wait for a response. She didn't need one. With her head held high, Eleanor walked away. And this time, she wasn't looking back. The weight of rejection. 3 days had passed since Eleanor walked out of her mother's house. But the words still clung to her like a stain she couldn't scrub away. We don't want the Hartwell family to know we have a daughter who's just a cleaner. The phrase repeated in her mind like a cruel joke. That Sunday afternoon, she found solace in the one thing that never betrayed her, cleaning. With slow, methodical movements, she wiped the windows of her small apartment. The repetitive motion usually helped clear her thoughts. But today, her reflection in the glass stared back at her with tired, hollow eyes. She let out a bitter laugh. Her apartment was nothing fancy. A modest space in San Francisco. Furnished with hard-earned money. But it was hers. The framed certificates of recognition on the wall were proof of the years she had spent building an honest, respectable life. Yet, to her own family, it wasn't enough. She wasn't enough. The sudden chime of the doorbell startled her. Eleanor frowned. She wasn't expecting anyone. Peering through the peephole, her stomach twisted. Vanessa, and their mother. For a moment, she considered not opening the door. Just pretending she wasn't home. But she exhaled, steadying herself. With a measured breath, she unlocked the door. Vanessa was the first to speak. Her voice artificially bright. Hey, big sister, sorry for dropping by unannounced. Eleanor stepped aside, letting them in without a word. Her mother barely glanced around before commenting. This place is tidier than the last time I was here. It wasn't a compliment, more like a passive-aggressive jab. Eleanor ignored it. Would you like something to drink? No, thank you, her mother replied briskly. We came to talk. Eleanor crossed her arms. About what? Vanessa shifted uncomfortably, pushing a strand of perfectly styled hair behind her ear. The other day, I couldn't explain properly. That's why we're here. Eleanor's gaze hardened. Explain what? That I'm supposed to be dead? Her mother cleared her throat, irritation flickering in her eyes. There's no need to be emotional. Eleanor, this is an important decision for Vanessa's future. Vanessa reached for her hand. But Eleanor pulled away. Big sister, I really love Richard. Her voice was softer now. Almost pleading. His family, they're traditional. Especially his father. He's extremely particular about social appearances. Eleanor remained silent, waiting. Then, Vanessa said it. Please, don't come to the wedding. The words settled heavily in the air between them. Eleanor had already expected it. but hearing it from Vanessa's own mouth still made something inside her crack. Her voice was quiet when she spoke. "Why?" Her sister sighed, her hands clasped tightly together. "I don't want people to know I have a sister who's a cleaner." For a moment, neither of them moved. Eleanor felt something deep inside her go numb. The pain was there, sharp and real, but she refused to let it show. "Is my job so shameful?" she finally asked. "It's not shameful," Vanessa rushed to say. "It's just, Richard's family comes from generations of wealth. They have certain standards." "Standards?" Eleanor's voice rose slightly. "I wake up every morning before dawn to ensure that hundreds of people work in a clean, organized space. That's an honest job. Is that so hard for you to accept?" "Your work is commendable, Eleanor," their mother interjected. "But let's be realistic. The Hartwells are a powerful family in San Francisco. Being associated with them will elevate not just Vanessa, but our entire family." Eleanor's breath caught. "Social status." Her tone was bitter. "That's all you care about? Enough to erase your own daughter?" Her mother's eyes turned cold. "This is Vanessa's chance in life. Don't ruin it with your ego." "Ego?" Eleanor let out a humorless laugh. "Wanting to be acknowledged as family is ego?" Vanessa, her eyes glistening, whispered, "Please understand, big sister. Richard's father did a background check on our family. If he finds out, if he thinks I lied, I don't want to lose him." Eleanor's heart clenched at the desperation in her sister's voice. But she wasn't the one who had lied. "What exactly did you tell the Hartwells?" Eleanor asked, her voice like steel. Vanessa hesitated. After a long silence, their mother answered for her. "We told them you died. In an accident, 10 years ago." Eleanor's blood ran cold. "A car accident," her mother continued, voice devoid of emotion. "It was a tragic event, but we've moved on." Moved on. As if her existence had been nothing more than an inconvenience to be erased. Vanessa's voice trembled. "Please, for just 2 weeks, pretend you don't exist for us." Eleanor stood up slowly, her movements controlled. Tears burned behind her eyes. But she wouldn't let them fall. "I can't believe my own family is ashamed of me," she whispered. Her mother looked unimpressed. "Eleanor." "No." Eleanor cut her off. Her voice was steady, but her hands clenched into fists. "I have never been ashamed of my work. I wake up every morning. I work hard, and I take pride in what I do. The shame here isn't mine, it's yours." Her mother's lips parted, but no words came. Eleanor exhaled, turning toward the door. "Your lies will catch up with you one day," she said quietly. "What kind of future can a relationship built on deception possibly have?" She pulled the door open. "Please leave." Vanessa let out a quiet sob. Their mother stood still for a moment, then grabbed her daughter's arm, nudging her toward the exit. As the door shut behind them, Eleanor felt her knees buckle. She collapsed onto the sofa, pressing the heels of her hands against her eyes. The tears she had fought so hard to suppress came rushing out in heavy, gasping sobs. She cried for the family she had lost, for the love that had been conditional, for the sister she had once known, the one who used to hold her hand when they were kids. Whispering secrets under the covers. The golden hue of the setting sun streamed through the window, making her tears shimmer like molten gold. Her gaze landed on the framed certificates on her wall. Exemplary Employee of the Year. Outstanding Leadership in Facilities Management. A reminder of the life she had built. A reminder that she wasn't wrong. She wiped her tears, exhaling shakily. "I am not wrong," she whispered. And for the first time in years, she let herself believe it. A name that changed everything. 1 week before the wedding, the morning fog curled around the skyscrapers of San Francisco, painting the city in a muted gray. Eleanor arrived at Hartwell Tower earlier than usual, stepping into the familiar staff room with a quiet determination. Today was the annual deep cleaning of the executive floors. Every member of her team was mobilized. Standing before them, clipboard in hand, Eleanor addressed her staff. "Everyone, let's start with Building B today. Pay extra attention to the executive floors. I hear the Hartwell Corporation has a board meeting soon." Her voice was steady, professional, but inside, she was anything but calm. She had spent the past week burying herself in work, scrubbing and polishing as if she could erase the memory of her mother's cruel words. "We told them you died." The pain still lingered, a dull ache she couldn't shake. By 10 a.m., Eleanor was on the 26th floor, wiping the massive floor-to-ceiling windows of the executive boardroom. She had always loved this view. San Francisco stretched out beneath her. The Golden Gate Bridge faintly visible in the distance. "Magnificent, isn't it?" The deep, measured voice made her jump. Turning quickly, She found herself face to face with Jonathan Hartwell. The Jonathan Hartwell. The man who owned this building. The father of Vanessa's fiancé. Eleanor's breath caught for just a second, but she quickly regained her composure. Bowing her head slightly. "Good morning, Mr. Hartwell." Jonathan smiled, his presence commanding but not unkind. "Thank you for working so early in the morning." Eleanor nodded. "It's our job, especially on deep cleaning days." Jonathan studied her for a moment before glancing at her uniform. "Miss Foster," he said, reading her name tag. "I've heard a lot about you. The management team speaks very highly of your work." Eleanor blinked. She hadn't expected that. "Thank you," she said carefully. "I've been here for over 10 years. I love this job." Jonathan smiled. "That's the most important thing." He walked toward the window, hands in his pockets. "I started out with cleaning too. You know," he said suddenly. Eleanor tilted her head, surprised. Jonathan chuckled at her expression. "My father ran a small company when I was young. He made me start from the bottom, mopping floors, taking out the trash. That's how I learned what real work is." For the first time in days, Eleanor felt the tension in her shoulders ease. "And now, you own this building," she said, the corner of her lips lifting slightly. "Yes," Jonathan said with a chuckle. "Now I do." Then, as if shifting the conversation in an entirely different direction, he said, "Actually, my son is getting married next week." Eleanor's heart pounded so hard she was sure he could hear it. "Congratulations," she managed, keeping her voice neutral. Jonathan smiled. "Thank you." His fiancée is a wonderful young woman, the youngest daughter of the Foster family. Eleanor's grip on the cleaning cloth tightened. Jonathan turned to look at her. "Are you related to the Fosters in any way?" Eleanor froze. Her pulse roared in her ears. This was the moment. If she told the truth, it could destroy everything. Vanessa's marriage, her mother's carefully constructed web of lies. But if she lied, if she denied who she was, Eleanor swallowed. "No," she said, "it's just a coincidence that we share the same last name." Jonathan studied her for a long moment. It was impossible to tell if he believed her. Then, he sighed. "I see. You know, I heard Vanessa had a sister. But unfortunately, she died in an accident 10 years ago." Eleanor's breath hitched. The lie, their lie. Her stomach churned as she forced herself to nod. "Is that so?" she said, keeping her voice steady. Jonathan's expression softened. "When Richard told me, he seemed sad about it. He said he wished her sister was still alive so he could invite her to the wedding." A lump formed in Eleanor's throat. Richard, the man Vanessa was willing to lie for. He had wanted her there. Jonathan sighed, rubbing his chin. "Family is important, after all," he mused. Eleanor's chest tightened. She had spent years convincing herself that she didn't need her family, that she was strong on her own. But in that moment, standing in front of the father of her sister's fiancé, hearing the words, "family is important," she felt like a ghost, an invisible shadow in a life she had once been a part of. Jonathan suddenly smiled. "I'm sorry for keeping you from your work. Please, continue. I hope we'll have a chance to talk again sometime." Eleanor nodded numbly, watching as he walked away. She turned back to the window, staring at her own reflection. Family is important. Then why had hers thrown her away? The wedding day, and an unexpected call. The morning of Vanessa's wedding arrived beneath a cloudy San Francisco sky. Eleanor sat on her sofa, a cup of coffee in her hands, staring blankly at the steam curling from the surface. She had the day off. No work, no distractions, just the silence of her apartment and the knowledge that, at this very moment, her mother and sister were at a luxury hotel, preparing for the grand wedding. A wedding she was never meant to be part of. She tried to focus on the book in her lap, but her eyes skimmed over the words without absorbing them. Her mind kept wandering back to Jonathan Hartwell. Family is important. He had said it so easily, so confidently. If only he knew how little that statement meant in her world. Then, suddenly, her phone rang. She frowned. Vanessa? She let it ring. Then it rang again, and again, and again. Her sister. Her mother. Numbers she didn't recognize. Eleanor's heart began to pound. Something was wrong. Finally, she exhaled and swiped to answer. "Hello?" A choked sob filled the receiver. "Eleanor." Vanessa's voice was frantic. "Where are you?" Eleanor's body went rigid. "At home." "Why? You have to come. Right now. Please." Her sister's voice cracked. "Vanessa, what's going on?" Eleanor asked, gripping the phone tighter. "Richard's father, he knows about you." The words sent an icy chill down Eleanor's spine. Jonathan Hartwell. He knew. What do you mean he knows? Eleanor's voice was eerily calm. He met you last week. Remember? At the company. Vanessa's words tumbled out in a desperate rush. He figured it out. He knows you're my sister. And now everything is falling apart. Eleanor's breath hitched. So that was why they were calling. They hadn't wanted her before. But now? Eleanor, please. Vanessa's voice trembled. The wedding might be cancelled. Richard is furious. Dad, Jonathan, he's saying we're the ones who should be ashamed. Not you. He's telling Richard that you're one of the most respected employees at the company. That you're someone to be proud of. Eleanor closed her eyes. Proud. Jonathan Hartwell, a man with power, wealth, and status, was saying he was proud of her, while her own family had erased her. Eleanor, please come. Vanessa sobbed. I don't know what to do. Richard is questioning everything. I might lose him. Eleanor took a slow breath. Staring out the window, she could hear their mother's voice in the background. Frantic, angry, desperate. She had spent years waiting for her family to acknowledge her, to want her, to need her, and now, for the first time, they did. Eleanor exhaled. Where is the ceremony? There was a moment of stunned silence. Then Vanessa's voice, barely a whisper. The Fairmont Hotel. The ceremony starts in an hour. Eleanor nodded. All right, she said. Vanessa let out a shaky breath of relief. Oh, thank you, Eleanor. But Eleanor cut her off. I'm not doing this for you, Vanessa, she said quietly. I'm doing this for the truth. And with that, she ended the call. Her hands trembled as she set her phone down. She turned toward her closet. Hanging there, untouched for months, was a navy blue silk dress. She had bought it for a friend's wedding but had never worn it. Today, she would. The moment of truth. The Fairmont Hotel loomed ahead like a castle on the hill, its white facade gleaming despite the overcast sky. Eleanor sat in the back of a taxi, her heart pounding with every passing block. She had styled her hair, slipped into the navy blue dress, and even applied a touch of makeup, things she never normally bothered with. Not because she wanted to impress anyone, but because today, she refused to be overlooked. As the taxi pulled up to the grand entrance, she hesitated. She had spent years convincing herself she didn't need their approval. Then why was she here? Her phone vibrated. Sophia, her best friend. Eleanor picked up. Eleanor, what's wrong? Sophia's voice was filled with concern. I'm standing outside my sister's wedding venue, Eleanor admitted, gripping the phone tighter. And I don't know if I should walk in. Sophia was silent for a moment. Then she said, You're not doing this for them. You're doing this for yourself. You deserve to be seen. Eleanor swallowed. Sophia was right. Thank you, she whispered. She ended the call, took a deep breath, and stepped forward. Inside, the grand ballroom buzzed with whispers. Something was wrong. Guests huddled together, casting curious glances toward the front of the room. When Eleanor entered, the whispering stopped. A woman, elderly, dignified, stared at her. Oh my, you're her. Eleanor turned to face her. Excuse me? You're Vanessa's sister, aren't you? The woman's gaze softened. I heard about everything. It seems the ceremony may be postponed. Eleanor inhaled sharply and turned toward the center of the ballroom. There, standing beside a pristine white altar, was Vanessa. Tears streaked her carefully made-up face. And beside her, their mother, Margaret Foster, stood frozen, face pale. On the opposite side of the room stood Richard Hartwell and his family. And at the center of it all, Jonathan Hartwell, the man who had unknowingly unraveled everything. For a moment, Eleanor hesitated. Then, finally, Vanessa turned. Their eyes met. And in that instant, Eleanor knew, this was it. The moment the lies would end. A family exposed. The moment Vanessa saw Eleanor standing in the doorway. Her breath caught. Big sister, she whispered, her voice barely audible over the murmur of the guests. Eleanor stepped forward, her heels clicking against the polished marble floor. Every pair of eyes in the ballroom turned toward her. Her mother, Margaret, was the first to react. She rushed toward Eleanor, grabbing her arm with an iron grip. What are you doing here? She hissed under her breath. You're going to ruin everything. Eleanor slowly pulled her arm free. You called me, she said evenly. Or have you already forgotten? Vanessa stumbled forward, her wedding gown shimmering under the chandeliers. Eleanor, please, her voice cracked. Richard's family is furious. They don't understand? Eleanor's expression remained unreadable. They don't understand what? Vanessa? That you lied? That you told them I was dead? A sharp gasp rippled through the crowd. Richard Hartwell, who had been standing stiffly beside his father, turned to Vanessa with a look of utter disbelief. "Is it true?" he asked. His voice eerily calm. Vanessa's face crumpled. Answer me," Richard demanded. His blue eyes, once filled with love, now burned with something colder. Vanessa opened her mouth, but no words came out. It was Jonathan Hartwell who broke the silence. "So, you really did lie," he said, shaking his head in disappointment. Margaret straightened her back, her eyes flashing with desperation. "Mr. Hartwell, please understand." Jonathan held up a hand, silencing her instantly. "No, you understand," he said, his voice carrying the weight of authority. "I have no issue with hardworking people. I built my company from the ground up with my own 2 hands. But what I cannot tolerate is dishonesty." Margaret paled. Vanessa clutched her chest, struggling to hold herself together. Richard exhaled slowly before turning back to Eleanor. "You're my fiancé's sister," he said, his voice softer now. "And yet, I've never even heard your name until today. That doesn't sit right with me." Eleanor studied him carefully. "I work at Hartwell Tower," she said at last. "I've worked there for over a decade as head of the cleaning staff." Another murmur swept through the room. Vanessa flinched as if the words physically hurt her. "I'm proud of my job," Eleanor continued, standing tall. "I work hard. I take care of people. But my family decided that wasn't enough. So they erased me, because, to them, I wasn't worth acknowledging." Richard turned back to Vanessa. "You told me your sister had passed away," he said, his voice strained with barely contained anger. "But here she is, very much alive. So tell me, Vanessa, what else have you lied about?" Vanessa shook her head quickly. "Richard, please, I was scared," she choked on a sob. "Your family is so prestigious. And mine isn't. I thought if they knew the truth, they'd look down on me. So instead, you lied to me?" Richard's voice cut through the room like a blade. "Did you ever think about how I'd feel once I found out?" Vanessa's lip trembled. "I didn't want to lose you," she whispered brokenly. Richard took a step back. "But you already have." Vanessa let out a small, strangled cry. Eleanor watched as the world Vanessa had built on deception began to crumble. And yet, she felt no satisfaction in seeing her sister break. Just an aching sadness. Because despite everything, this was still her sister. The truth will always come out. Jonathan Hartwell sighed heavily, running a hand over his face before turning toward Eleanor. "Miss Foster," he said, his voice measured, "I owe you an apology." Eleanor's brow furrowed. "An apology? I never should have believed the lie without question." Jonathan admitted, "When I met you last week, I had a feeling you were more than just an employee. I see now that you're someone to be respected. And I respect you far more than I respect the people who tried to erase you." Eleanor swallowed hard, emotions swirling inside her. "Thank you," she said quietly. Jonathan then turned back to Richard. "What do you want to do, son?" Richard hesitated, staring at Vanessa, who was clutching the fabric of her gown like it was the only thing keeping her upright. Finally, he exhaled. "The wedding is off," he said. Margaret let out a sharp gasp. "Richard, please," Vanessa reached for him. But he gently pulled away. "I can't marry someone who doesn't trust me enough to be honest," he said, his voice firm but not unkind. "Vanessa, I loved you, but I can't build a life with lies." Vanessa let out a soft, broken sob. Jonathan turned to the guests. Lifting his hands, "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "the wedding is cancelled. Thank you all for coming. But I believe we are done here." Slowly, people began to disperse, murmuring among themselves. Margaret stood frozen, her carefully curated reputation crumbling into nothing. Vanessa, her veil slipping from her head, looked up at Eleanor with tear-filled eyes. "I'm sorry," she whispered. I should have never let it come to this." For the first time, Eleanor saw something genuine in her sister's face. Regret. Not just regret for losing Richard, but regret for losing Eleanor. Eleanor exhaled. "The truth always comes out, Vanessa," she said softly. "It's just a matter of when." Then, without another word, Eleanor turned and walked away. This time, she wasn't being pushed out. This time, she was choosing to leave. 6 months later, a new beginning. 6 months had passed since that fateful day. Eleanor sat in her apartment, surrounded by the people who mattered. Her mother, her sister, and even Richard, who had become a friend despite everything. "To new beginnings," Eleanor said, raising her glass. "To new beginnings," everyone echoed. Much had changed. Vanessa and Richard had remained in touch, not as lovers, but as two people learning how to be honest with themselves. Margaret, humbled by everything, had started volunteering to help single mothers in need. And Eleanor? She had been promoted. I heard Jonathan Hartwell personally recommended you, Vanessa said with a small smile. Eleanor laughed. Yes, I'm now the deputy head of facilities management. Vanessa grinned. I'm proud of you, big sister. For the first time in years, Eleanor believed her. She looked down at the cream-colored envelope in her hands. A wedding invitation. But this time, the words were different. We invite our proud sister, Eleanor Foster, to the wedding of Vanessa Foster and Richard Hartwell. Tears welled in Eleanor's eyes. The truth had nearly destroyed them. But in the end, it had set them free. And for the first time in her life, Eleanor felt like she truly belonged. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that like button, share this video with your friends, and subscribe for more real-life family dramas. Let me know in the comments what you think about today's story. Was it fair or totally messed up? See you in the next one.